about the hips this morning. I have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to do the best I can. Excuse me for my voice. The hips are quite a complicated joint. There's a lot going on there. The hip essentially is the juncture between the pelvis and the femur, and it actually is more of a joint. The ball actually goes in the socket more than the shoulder does, which means that we have more stability in the hips than we do in the shoulders, more mobility in the shoulders than the hips. But there's still quite a bit that we can do, so just the vocabulary. This is called hip flexion, when we shorten that distance between the femur and the torso. This is called hip extension, when we lengthen the front of the thigh and take the leg behind. The hip also can abduct, abduct, like abduction, take away. That's that. And then it can adduct, which means come together. We can go out to the side farther than we can go across, of course. And then we can rotate externally and internally. So flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, adduction, external and internal rotation. All right, and we will use a small ball. If you don't have a small ball, a full roll of toilet paper works really well, or you can use a folded blanket or towel, and we'll use the TheraBand also. We're beginning in constructive rest pose. Knees are bent so that your feet are on the floor in line with your sit bones. So this position does take us into hip flexion, and one of the things I'd like you to be aware of as we release into gravity is seeing if you can have this passive hip flexion without having a lot of tension. So you may feel at the front of the hip joint. There are several superficial hip flexors. If you lift your foot up, you'll feel one of them pop up. So we want to be as soft in the hip crease as possible in this particular position. Even though we are in hip flexion, let it be a passive hip flexion as the body relaxes. And the reason we're taking this position rather than having the legs straight out, which would allow those hip flexors to not be shortened, is that when the legs are extended straight out and you don't do anything, you're going to be into a lumbar extension. So we want to have a neutral spine, and the legs bent in this position allows that to be the case. So you can think of that big bone of the thigh, the femur, dropping down into the socket and settling there. There's not that much effort that needs to be applied in order to keep the legs in that position. And be sure that you're taking your arms wider than your mat, your palms up, so that the shoulder girdle also can be relaxed. Take a couple moments, allowing the body to sink into gravity. Being aware of your neutral spine position, and continuing to try to soften those hip flexors, soften in this hip crease. Now we'll begin to engage the inner core muscles. Connecting first with the pelvic floor, which is anchored to the tailbone, the two sit bones, and the pubic bone. In your mind's eye, connect those 4 points. Picture the diamond that results. Take an inhale. And with the exhale, shrink the diamond into the center, and see if you can do that without getting any tension in the front hips or without squeezing the buttocks. And then relax that effort. Completely letting everything go. And we'll prepare to do that again. Inhale, picturing the diamond of the pelvic floor, and shrink it down to the center with the exhale. This time squeeze the sphincters and then release and relax completely. Soften into the full of gravity again. One more time at the pelvic floor. Inhale, prepare. Exhale, shrink the pelvic floor, engage the sphincters. Think of the perineum traveling up towards the crown of the head. And while you're doing that, maintain and see if you're still soft and released in the hip flexors and not doing too much. You might feel a little bit with the buttocks because we are engaging muscles that are attached to the piriformis, but let's minimize no clenching of the buttocks. And then relax completely. And let all of that effort go, releasing once again into the neutral spine. And then we'll gather the transversus abdominis around that neutral spine-pelvis relationship. Picture the belt of the transversus abdominis wrapping around the low torso. And as you exhale, gather it nice and snug across the hip points and around the low belly. And then release that with your inhale. Still being aware of the hip crease being as soft as possible. Prepare to do that again. Picture the belt all the way around. And exhale, gather it. And then release and relax. Give into gravity, soften around the pelvic girdle and in the low belly. Once more, inhale, prepare. And exhale. Gently wrap that belt around and then keep that engagement. Engage the pelvic floor as well. There's your whole inner core. Maintain that while you breathe. And then relax completely. Again, softening into neutral, keeping as released in the hip flexors as possible. Bring the arms down to the sides. We prepare for arm lifts. Maintaining the neutral spine with the support of the inner core. Inhale, bring the arms up to vertical. Exhale, engage the inner core and reach the arms back, maintaining your neutral pelvis and neutral spine. Inhale, arms float up. And then lower the arms down to the sides and relax. Soften those hip crease, in that hip crease, and relax the buttocks. Soften the low belly, the pelvic floor. Do that again. Inhale, arms float up. And exhale, engage the inner core to support as you reach back. Maintain your lower back, maintain your pelvis. Inhale, arms float up. And exhale, arms come back down to the sides. Relax completely. One more time. Inhale, arms float up. And exhale, shrinking the pelvic floor and gathering that belt around nice and snug as the arms go back. Inhale, arms float up. And then lower the arms down to the sides. And relax completely. Okay, bring the hands behind the head and we'll warm up the obliques. Inhale, opening the arms wide, feeling your ribs flare. Exhale, feel your back ribs reach down to the mat and knit your front ribs together. Maintain your neutral spine when you make this effort around the rib cage, and inhale, relax. Feel the ribs flare. And then again, imprint the back ribs and knit the front ribs. Keep the elbows wide, maintain the neutral lower back spine. Inhale, relax, let the ribs flare. Last time, exhale, imprint and knit. And maintain, engage your inner core, go into a head lift, keeping your neutral spine. Inhale, lower back down, maintain all that core work, and exhale, lift the head. Inhale, lower back down. Once more, up and back down. And then release. We're going to bring the hands to sit on the front of the pelvis. Coming into alternate leg lifts. So we're doing our first motion with the hip. This is hip flexion, and when we lower down, hip extension to some degree. We'll engage the inner core, knit and imprint the ribs, keep the pelvis steady, and lift the right foot. So you feel you're closing that hip crease down a little bit, and then lower it back back down. Keep the pelvis steady. Re-engage and take the other leg. Flexing at the hip and then lowering down. So we are extending the hip as we lower, even though we're not going out to full hip extension. And then again, we'll come to the right side and lift and lower. Keep steadying the pelvis. And then the left side up and lower. And once more like that, keep the pelvis still and lower. And then the other side and down. Relax a moment. And then maintain your, or renew your inner core and your knitting and imprinting of the ribs. We'll lift the right leg again. This time flex the foot, extend the leg out. And then we're going to point the toes and lower the leg down towards the floor. Be sure you maintain your neutral spine, your steady pelvis, and extend the front of the leg. It takes some effort to keep the pelvis steady as you do that. Then we're going to come up, only as high as you can come without losing your neutral spine. So it's going to depend on your hamstring length. Don't let the lower back go flat. Then we'll bend the knee and lower back down. We'll do the same thing on the left side, lifting the left foot up. Flex your foot, extend your leg out, and then we'll point the toes, engage, and lower down, feeling that length come at the front of the leg. Hip extension, but no lumbar extension. We're not letting the back arch. And then come up, reaching up towards the ceiling with the foot, lengthening up, finding that hamstring stretch, and then bend the knee. And keep the pelvis steady as you lower the left foot down. We'll do the same thing again one more time. Anchor, lift the right foot, exhale, flex, extend, point the toes, and then lengthen the front of the leg. Feel your foot going down towards the floor, your spine staying steady as you go into that hip extension, and then up towards the ceiling, hip flexion, keeping your steady pelvis, bend the knee, and re-anchor as you lower down to keep the pelvis stable as you lower the foot. And then the same thing on the left. Lift and flex, extend. Point the toes and lower down. Hip extension. Keep a neutral pelvis, please. And then lift up. Maintain that neutral pelvis as you stretch the hamstring. And then bend the knee and lower down. And relax a moment. Now we do the same thing with some rotation. Engage the inner core. Knit and imprint. We'll lift the right foot up. Flex, extend. Point your toes, and then without letting your leg abduct, externally rotate. And we're going to keep that external rotation and go down into hip extension with the external rotation. And then again, like we did before, lift up. Stay externally rotated, and then bend the knee. It's going to go out to the side because you're in external rotation. Move back into parallel, and then lower the foot. And then let's do the same thing on the left. Lift the left foot, extend the leg, point the toes, roll out without taking the leg wider, and then lower down. Hip extension with external rotation, and come all the way up. Keep your neutral spine. Stay turned out in the socket. And then we're going to bend the knee. Since you're turned out, the knee is going to go wide. Keep your pelvis steady. And then roll into neutral and bring the foot back down. Let's do that one more time with each leg. Anchor, lift the right, flex, extend, point the toes. External rotation without abduction. Lower down. Hip extension. Keep your external rotation. Keep your neutral pelvis. Lift up. Continue to keep your pelvis neutral. Bend at the knee. It's going to go wide, but don't let your hips tilt. And then roll into parallel and lower the foot down. And left side up. Extend, flexing the foot, point the toe, external rotation. Neutral pelvis, lower the leg back down towards the floor. Keep your external rotation as you extend the hip and maintain it as you come up to the ceiling. And then bend the knee. Keep your pelvis steady, roll into parallel, and lower the foot down. And relax a moment. We're going to engage the inner core, knit and imprint, and just tilt the pelvis, giving the lower back a little stretch. And then release. And again, engage the inner core, knit and imprint, and tilt the pelvis. So you're actually lengthening the front of your thighs a little bit, a little small bit of hip extension there, and then release. One more time. Engage the inner core, knit and imprint, and tilt the pelvis. Now you may begin to feel as you're tilting the pelvis the work in the buttocks and the back of the thighs. Those are the muscles that do hip extension, so you can start to see how those work here. And then release. Okay, we're going to bring the arms down to the sides in preparation for the 100. Engage your inner core, knit and imprint. We'll take the right foot up and the left foot up. Palms down, knit and imprint. As you press the palms down, lift the head. Extend the legs, and we're going to go into external rotation with the legs, and exhale for 5 pulses, and inhale for 5. Exhale, and inhale. Exhale, inhale, exhale, and inhale. Neutral spine, externally rotating the legs. Inhale, chin into the chest, arms active. Keep engaging the inner core. One more set. And then we'll take the head down, one hand on each knee. We're going to drop the knees out wide. So take a moment and let the inner thighs stretch. Now here again, you can see that we're in pretty deep hip flexion, but for this exercise that we call the hip circles is meant to relax the hip flexors. So we're going to let the legs be passive. If I don't do anything, they're just flopped that wide. And then start to make some small circles using the hands and the arms to power the legs. If I don't do anything, my legs are flopping. I'm going to keep these nice loose circles and trying to relax the front of the thighs, relax around the hip joint, stirring the legs around, and then reverse. Legs as passive as possible. And then let's bring the knees close into the chest and let the lower back flatten. And then just rock very slowly from side to side on the back of the sacrum. And then we'll lower the feet one at a time down to the floor. Engage the inner core. Inhale and reach the arms up overhead. Exhale, tilt your pelvis and straighten your legs out. And then we're going to flex the feet and reach out through the ball of the foot, then point the toes. And then flex the toes back, and then flex the whole foot back. And again, reach out through the balls of the feet, point the toes, pull the toes back, and flex the whole foot back. One more time. Reach out through the ball of the foot, point the toes, pull the toes back, pull your whole foot back. Still working on that hip extension, trying to tuck your tail between your legs. Squeeze your toes and fan your toes. Squeeze and fan and squeeze and fan. And then let everything relax. Passive stretch. And re-engage the core. Tilt the pelvis, knit and imprint the ribs. Slide your feet back in. And then lower the arms down to the sides. Okay, we're going to use a TheraBand now. So we're going to take the TheraBand and loop it around the ball of the foot. Engage around your pelvis and straighten the left leg out, maintaining your neutral spine. We're going to lengthen the right leg, and we're going to start with a stretch here. I'm going to lower the leg a little bit below halfway down, and then start to move the leg over to the left side, keeping the right hip down. This is a stretch for the outer thigh. And I'm going to time it for 30 seconds. So if you let your pelvis roll, you're not going to get the stretch in the outer thigh. And if you need to choke up on the band, you can do that. But we want to feel the stretch in the outside of the leg, outer hip capsule stretching. Now we're going to bring the leg back in line with the hip joint. And keeping your tailbone down on the floor, extend the leg up to stretch the hamstring. Again, we're going to maintain for 30 seconds. So when you're doing a stretch, you want to do at least a 30-second count. It's incrementally better if you increase it to 60 or 90. And if you really want to get into some structural change, to stretch at the level of the connective tissue, 3 minutes. And then we're going to keep the band around the leg as we do our leg circles. So we're going to steady the pelvis and circle the leg very carefully 5 times around, but go very slowly. Be quite mindful of the pelvis being steady, and then feel the movement of the ball moving around the socket. So you're getting some abduction, some extension, some adduction, and flexion, all of those motions. Good. Observe that circling around of the hip joint. 5 times one way, then you reset the core and go 5 times the other. Be sure the pelvis is staying steady. When you're done, let's bend the right leg and take the band off. Left hand on the left hip, and then right knee is going to go to the right armpit. And now we're stretching inner thigh. You'll also feel this stretch at the front of the left thigh. And again, we're going to stay for 30 seconds. Make sure the left hip stays down. If you rock your left hip up, you're losing the anchor away from which you're stretching. And now let's bring the left hand onto the right knee, and we're going to pull across, and this time go in to a spinal twist. So there is, of course, some element of the outer hip capsule being stretched, and you can emphasize that by bringing your knee down closer to the floor if you like. Also, we're stretching up the whole right side. And then let's come to the back and bring both of the knees into the chest. Then we'll place the right foot down on the floor, and again, use the band, this time wrapping it around the ball of the left foot. You could equally well do this with a yoga strap or any kind of scarf or something. So we're going to straighten the leg out, the left leg out, and the right leg out. And the left leg is going to come down lower than halfway down to the floor. And then we're keeping the left hip on the mat and sliding the left leg over to the right side of the body. No twist here, we'll do that later. Just stretching for the outer thigh. Then we bring the left leg back into line in the center. And anchoring the pelvis, we'll take that left leg up and stretch the hamstring. Keep your tailbone down, keep your pelvis level. And then we'll re-engage with the inner core, knit and imprint the ribs, and circle the left leg around 5 times. Go slowly, please, and follow the movement of that ball of the femoral head in the hip joint. Nice and slow. Of course, we're studying the pelvis, observing the rolling of the ball in the socket and those various positions of the hip. Reset and reverse for 5 in the opposite direction. And then let's let go of the band. Bring the right hand onto the left knee and move into a twist. Still continue to be aware of that stretch of the outer hip capsule, and then stretching up the whole right leg. I'm sorry, the whole left side. And then let's bring both knees into the chest. Then lower 1 foot at a time down to the floor. And reestablish your neutral position. Okay, we're going to take a quick run through the abdominal series before we get into more hip activity. Of course, there's hip activity in the abdominal series, but we're mainly dealing with just hip extension and flexion. So let's set neutral, knit and imprint, lift 1 foot up, and then the other foot up. Really feel your belt wrapping around your ribs, knitting to the opposite back pockets. Lift your head, extend one leg. Both hands are to the bent knee. One hand on the outside near the ankle and the inside near the knee, and then switch. Keep the elbows out wide, the chin into the chest, shoulders dropping down. Nice clean line of action with the leg as it bends. The foot is hiding behind your thigh, staying in a parallel groove. And then let's bring the knees in and put the head down. Relax the neck, turn it from side to side. And return to the center. Reestablish your neutral tabletop. One hand on each knee. Find the inner core, knit and imprint. Put a lot of emphasis on the imprinting of the ribs. Lift the head and use your exhale to extend the knees and reach the arms out behind you. Inhale, bend the knees and come back in. Keeping your imprint steady the whole time. Reach out and inhale, come back in. Exhale, maintain your stable pelvis. Inhale, come back in. No flat back unless you're working intentionally with flat back, and then you're going to keep the flat back the whole time. And let's place the head down, hands on the knees. Rock your knees slowly from side to side. And return to your neutral tabletop position. The single straight leg stretch, big hip extension and flexion, big stretch of the front thigh and the back thigh. We'll engage the inner core and imprint and lift the head. Both legs are straight, one up, one down. Stretching the hamstring of the up leg, the quad and the hip flexors of the down leg, maintaining neutral spine, neutral pelvis, or flat back if you're working with flat back, but maintain the position as you switch the legs. See if you can be aware both of the stretch of the hamstring and of the front thigh. And then let's bring the knees in, rest the head, and slowly turn the head from side to side, shoulders relaxed. And then come back into the center. Find your neutral position. Hands will come behind the head for the double straight leg stretch. Re-engage the inner core and imprint and lift your head. Anchoring in the pelvis, extend the legs up without changing the position of the pelvis. Lower the legs down. Hip extension. Lift the legs up. Hip flexion. And lower. Maintain your pelvis steady, your lower back steady, and come back up. So no rocking in the pelvis. Maintaining your spine. Finding movement in the hip, but without movement in the spine. And then bend the knees, lower the head down, relax a moment. If you want to flatten your back as you relax, that's fine. And then we'll set up the neutral spine again, re-engage, lift the head, and go into the crisscross. Stabilize the pelvis, bicycle the legs. Reach across, armpit reaching over towards the bent knee. Pelvis really steady. And then let's bring the knees into the chest one last time and turn the head slowly from side to side. And then let's lower the feet one at a time down to the floor. And relax. Now we're going to get the small ball, or your rolled up towel, or your roll of toilet paper, and place it between the knees. We're moving towards a pelvic lift, so if you have a support behind your head, take that out now. We're going to engage around the pelvis, maintaining the neutral pelvis, squeeze into the ball, and maintain that squeeze. And then slowly release the squeeze of the ball. And again, reset the inner core and squeeze on the ball and maintain. Feel those inner thighs working. This is adduction. And then slowly release. One more time, inner core and squeeze. And slowly release. Now we'll add the pelvic lift, inner core, squeeze, tilt the pelvis, knit and imprint, keep squeezing on the ball and raise the hips up. So we have adduction, the knees squeezing into the ball, hip extension. Feel now for sure the work in the buttocks and the backs of the legs, lifting the hips up and lengthening the front thighs. Keep tilting the pelvis as you roll down. Imprint the back ribs. Draw the pubic bone towards the navel as you come down, one vertebra at a time. And then release to neutral. And then relax the squeeze and the core work. Twice more. Inner core, squeeze the ball, tilt the pelvis, knit and imprint, and then raise the hips. Feeling the work of the big muscles at the back of the legs and the buttocks. And then come down, scooping the belly, rolling through the spine. Once the pelvis is untilted, then you can relax the squeeze in the ball and release the core. Let's do it once more. Inner core, squeeze the ball, tilt the pelvis, knit and imprint, and lift. Continue to squeeze on the ball. And continue to tilt the pelvis as you roll down. Keep squeezing the ball. And then relax completely. We're going to keep working with the ball and turn onto the left side. I'm just going to get a drink of water. So lie on the left side with the ball between the knees. We're at a 45-degree hip flexion. We'll go to 90 and 0, but this is halfway between. Engage the inner core, and then squeeze down into the ball. Keeping your belt nice and snug around the hips. Unweight the right knee, only as high as you can go without dropping the ball or whatever else you're using for support there. And then lower and squeeze. And then unweight. So now we're getting into the external rotators. You should feel the muscles in the right buttock working here. And lower, squeeze. And unweight. So that thigh rolling out in the socket. Take your time. And lower and squeeze. And unweight. And last one there. And unweight. And then relax. And we'll move into 90-degree hip flexion. This places the feet and the knees at the front of the mat. And it's a 90-degree angle between the pelvis and the thigh. We'll do the same thing. Using the inner core, we squeeze down into the ball, and then unweight. So lift as high as you can without dropping that ball, and then lower and squeeze, pressing into it, and unweight. So the muscles in the buttocks working as you externally rotate and press. So there's some adduction again, inner thighs working, and external rotation. So again, squeeze, and lift, and then finish, relax. We're going to go all the way out into 0-degree hip flexion. Re-engage the inner core and do the same thing. Press into the ball and then unweight. And press into the ball. So this is hip extension. Not only are you externally rotating, but since the front of the thighs are extended, you can feel a little bit more of the gluteals working there. The muscles that straighten the front thighs, your hip extensors. You may also feel your hamstring, it is engaged. Lift, lower and squeeze, When you're finished with those, we're going to take the ball out and straighten the legs out. Now you'll find if you bring your legs all the way underneath you, straight underneath, your lower back is going to be a little bit extended. Your lumbar spine will be a little bit engaged. So we want to bring the feet just slightly forward so we're not in full hip extension, so we can have a neutral lumbar extension. So engage the inner core, take an Oregon lift, and keep your inner thighs working towards each other. Keep that sense of adducting as you lift the legs up. And then just abduction with the top leg. Lift and lower 5 times. And then with the bottom leg, keep that top leg steady and lower the bottom leg down and up. Abduction with the bottom leg. And then let's do the scissors. So here we get both functions. One leg is being extended, one is flexed, and then they switch. Keep the pelvis steady so that regardless of the position of the legs, your pelvis is sitting steady. And then to the center, find that adduction, inner thighs together. Re-engage your inner core and your organ lift, and then circle the top leg. So again, just observe, you're moving the ball around in the socket. 5 times one way, then 5 the other. Then we're going to lower the bottom leg, internally rotate the top leg. We haven't done internal rotation yet, so roll the leg in. Keep the front of the thigh very long and lower your toes down towards the mat behind you. And then lift the leg. We're going to externally rotate, flex the foot, and keep the external rotation, bring the heel down towards the mat in front of you. Lift, point the toes, roll in with the whole thigh, and then just lower the leg down. Try not to reach with your toes. And roll, flex, roll out, flex, reach the heel down. By not reaching with the toes, I mean don't let your ankle distort. Roll in and keep your straight line all the way down the front of the leg as you reach the foot towards the floor. Roll out and flex as you reach the heel towards the floor. We're going twice more. Roll in, internal rotation, lower the leg down. Roll out, external rotation, lower the heel down. One more time. Then return the top leg into parallel, re-engage the inner core, adduct with the bottom leg, and then hold the legs up as we work the feet. Flex, squeeze, point, fan, flex, squeeze, point, fan, and flex, squeeze, point, fan, and flex. Keep your toes open, reach and squeeze, and pull back. Open, reach, squeeze, retract last time. And lower down. So just take note, you may have quite a bit of sensation here. We're going to turn over to the other side. We will stretch out. Well, don't worry. We're going to do the other side before we stretch. So we take the ball again. Hips are at 45-degree flexion. Holding the ball between the knees, neck and shoulders comfortable. Engage the inner core. Then we're going to squeeze down into the ball and then unweight. And press down and unweight. And squeeze and unweight. 2 more times. And then relax and go to 90-degree hip flexion, and again begin by squeezing and then unweight. So all of these activities are using the external rotators, the piriformis, and then there are several other deeper ones. So you may feel, hopefully you'll feel that each of these three positions activates a slightly different set of the external rotators, a slightly different portion of those muscles that roll the thigh bone out in the socket. When you're done with the 5 in the 90-degree position, we go all the way out to 0-degree hip flexion. As straight down the front of the thighs as possible. You might not be able to get all the way to 0, it might be a few degrees forward, but lengthen down the front of the thighs, support with the inner core, and then press and unweight. And this one may feel a bit less subtle because not only are you externally rotating, you're also extending. So if you reach back and feel, you should feel quite a bit of tone in the whole buttock. Then we're going to take the ball out and extend the legs out. Again, not all the way directly underneath you because then your lower back's going to be hyperextended, but slightly forward so you can roll your hip forward, your left hip forward, and that your lower back is in its neutral position. Engage your inner core and your organ lift. Both legs are going to come up off of the mat, and then we take the top leg into abduction for 5 times. And then the bottom leg would go down and up. And then extension and flexion, scissoring, both legs falling into extension and flexion. Stabilize the pelvis. Fingertips on the floor if you need to. Then we meet in the center, re-engage the core, and we circle the top leg. And take it slow. See what kind of range of motion you can get without your pelvis moving and staying very engaged around the whole low core. Five times one way and 5 times the other. Then we're going to bring the bottom leg down to the floor, re-engage the core, internally rotate from the top of the leg, and then keep that long line down the front of the leg as you lower the foot down towards the floor behind you. And then lift the leg, externally rotate, and reach the heel down towards the floor in front. You don't actually have to get to the floor. That's not the important part. The important part is the roll and the reach. Rolling in and reaching back, rolling out, and reaching front. Point, roll in, reach it back. Do not let your ribs jut forward though. And reach down with the heel. When you roll in, be mindful that your ribs don't jut. When you roll out, be mindful that your pelvis doesn't rock back. Let's do it one more time. Steady pelvis, knit the ribs, roll in and reach back, and roll out and reach front, and then relax that leg down. Okay, we're going to go down to the back now. Moving into the figure 4 stretch, which is the classic stretch for the piriformis. I'm going to show you a couple options, but we'll start with that one. Right ankle to the left knee. Steady the pelvis as you lift the foot up. And then support the back of the left leg. You can also rest your left foot on a stool or a ball. You can also push your right knee away. So we're going to do 30 seconds here. Try to make sure that your pelvis is not rocked to the right side. Now we're going to go a little bit more deeply into those external rotators. Keeping this position, move your foot farther to the left So your two knees are stacked towards each other. And then you're going to pull that whole complex in towards the belly. And you should be stretching deeply in the right buttock now. Then let's release. Bring the left foot to the floor and the right foot down. Rest in neutral. Then left ankle up to the right knee. And we'll support the back of the right leg. 30 seconds here. Be even at the back of the pelvis. Now we're going to slide the left foot farther to the right so that your knees are stacked. Then reach around, bring both legs towards the belly, deeply stretching in the left hip. And then release. We're going to work with the hip extensors, lengthening the superficial hip flexors. So we're going to turn to the belly, and I'm going to rest the hip point directly into the palm of each hand. I'm going to feel the pelvis balanced evenly into each hand. Engage your inner core. Be sure you feel your belt wrapping around the hip points and maintain the even balance across the hip points as you unweight the right leg. So we definitely don't want to let the right hip come up off of the right palm, but also be mindful that it doesn't sink into it and lower back down. Re-engage the inner core and then do the same thing with the left side. Trying to keep that belt very snug so there's no shifting at all at the front of the pelvis, and lower back down. This is a bit subtle. Engage your inner core and we'll switch to the right side. But in order to do this, you're having to use your core and the hip extensor muscles, the buttocks and the back of the thighs. Re-engage and then let's lift the left. And lower one more time on each leg. And release, and we're going to go into a child's pose. And then come to stand on your knees. I suggest that you fold your mat over. This one is not so subtle. This is a nice big stretch for the hip flexors. So we will start by bringing the left foot forward, left ankle and knee in line with each other. At first you're in your neutral spine. We're going to engage the inner core and then tilt the tail between the legs, and we'll stay for 30 seconds. Good stretch in the front of the right thigh. Try to relax the shoulders as much as possible. Keep tucking the tail, wrapping the belt so there's active engagement and support to that stretch. Think of standing really tall through the spine as well, so you're lengthening between the right knee and the top of the head. and then release. And we're going to go into child's pose for a moment. And then we'll stand up on the knees again. This time the right ankle and knee in line with each other in front. Good tall spine to begin. Engage the inner core, including the pelvic floor. And then we'll tuck the tail between the legs. Stretching the front left thigh. Keep breathing. If the stretch is intense, then you just breathe more slowly and relax the shoulders more. And then release, and let's go to the child's pose again. And now I'm going to show you a seated version of the piriformis stretch. So you can do this on a chair. I'm going to use a bench, which I find is a little bit easier to deal with. I'm giving this to you because it is often a silly barrier that people don't stretch because they don't want to get down on the floor. One of our main problems, of course, is that we sit too much. So I know that we're frequently on chairs, so we'll take advantage of that fact. So I'm sitting on the bench forward to begin. In order to stretch the right side, I'm going to lift my right foot up and I can turn the torso so that my shin is parallel to the bottom of the bench. I'm going to sit up tall and support with the core. And we're first going to move the breastbone towards the knee. So I'm reaching down towards the knee. This may not feel very intense in the right buttock, but we'll be getting there. So 30 seconds here. I want to keep the left hip down. You can also press that right knee down. Try not to collapse your chest as you do this rotation. After the 30 seconds in the first position, we come up, reestablish the steady base. Now the breastbone is pointing right towards the center of the shin. And again, we're going to bend forward here. And keep those sit bones down. Don't go too far into the forward bend. But reach down, and you will feel that stretch probably a little bit more clearly in the buttock at this point. And then sit up, and we have one more position. You're going to rotate the torso so the breastbone is pointing out over the toes, and bend down in that direction. Keeping the sit bones down. So again, you can use a chair for this. You don't want to be doing this on anything too soft. Probably a good supportive surface will help the stretch. And then sit up. And that'll do it for the right side. We'll come into the center for a moment. Hamstrings and piriformis are chronically tight in this culture, partly because we do this, sit too much. One sign that your piriformis is over tight is that if when you're standing or walking, your feet are out to the side. But if you have any back pain, quite likely the piriformis, no, not quite likely, but it is often the piriformis tightness that's tugging on the pelvis and causing that. So definitely worth getting those external rotators stretched out. Let's do the other side. So I'm going to bring the left chin up so it's parallel to the end of the bench. Sit tall, root the sit bones, rotate towards your left knee, and bend down. And then we sit tall and rotate to the center, breastbone in line with the shin. Root the sit bones and bend forward here. And then sit back up. Re-engage down through your sit bones and turn the chest so it's pointing over the ankle. And last position, bend down. And try to keep your sit bones reaching down towards the surface. And always when you're doing a forward bend like this, you can concentrate on not collapsing the chest. And then we'll come up and go to the center. And whenever we do something asymmetrical, we always want to bring it back into symmetry. So you can slide down and just release in this seated position. And slide back up. So you can stretch your hamstrings by doing a standing forward bend. This is also another opportunity to use some kind of surface. So if you can engage the inner core, take your neutral pelvis and then lift your leg up, not too high. So depending on how stretched your hamstrings are, you will have a lower surface. And then you can bend forward here, which will give you a really nice hamstring stretch. Let's do that for 30 seconds on each leg. And then we'll go to the other side. So whatever surface you initially put your foot up on should not distort your pelvis. If it's tucking your tail under, then it's too high. Then you just slide down the leg. And again, be careful not to collapse the chest. And then stand up tall. And then just to be symmetrical at the end, you can take a forward bend with your arms extended out, reaching your sit bones towards the ceiling and stretching your arms out. And then we'll slowly engage the core and roll up. All right, there you go. Hope your hips are feeling well. And all of that rotation, flexion, extension, moving in and out all makes sense to you. But I do encourage you to get yourself a chair or bench and stretch out your hips that way from time to time. All right, thank you. Be well.